I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. But it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. Welcome to the shrimp tank. Want to put it all together, this is big things. Doing big things, chasing big dreams. Yeah, it's all real, this life's all that it seems. All the chicks scream, all the dudes yell. This is just what I do and I do it well. With the flow fresher than the new shoe smell. Going through hell, but homie, keep going. You know the saying, you can reap what you sow in. So I don't chase girls, I just chase dreams. Play the same game, but we ain't in the same league. Running a campaign, Roadie 2016. Like a phone to die, put me in charge. I'm a general, from the front, I'ma lead the charge. Like a federal, fell in my lap.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here on the Shrimp Tank. This is your first time tuning in. We come live every single week on our Facebook account at Shrimp Tank Boca, as well as our Instagram account. And of course, you can catch all these amazing episodes up on our website, shrimptankpodcast.com. One of the few podcasts that now is connected to the OWL app. So you could actually call our past podcast guests one-on-one on the platform. Of course, they're busy professionals. So when you see them make themselves available, go ahead and stop what you're doing and give them a call. So every week we bring you the best and brightest entrepreneurs from South Florida, finding the do's and don'ts of running a business. And we're joined with the Florida Atlantic University. And I'm excited today because we have a past alumni joining us on the Shrimp Tank. But before we get into our guest today, I want to find out what is going on at the university itself. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Roland Kidwell. How is everything going, Roland?
Fantastic. How are you?
I am running 100 miles an hour. I was over at the Levan Center Innovation all morning, and they had their big innovation day, right? So it's just kind of fun to see all these innovative products happening around South Florida.
Yeah, there's
capital being raised down here. It's quite fun times.
Yes, indeed. So we got a few things to talk about that Florida Atlantic is up to. Get the QR code here. Zoom in on it on your camera. This is for the Veterans Florida Entrepreneurship Program. Starts tomorrow. Eligible for all military veterans who are interested in learning about starting a business or growing a business. It's free for veterans, I believe, but just double check on that to make sure. Then we've got the Fall 2024 Entrepreneur Boot Camp. That is going to be starting next week, next Thursday during the day. That has a bit of admission for students. It's free, but for the community, $300, and then for Florida Atlantic faculty, staff, and alumni, $150. So those are the two ads. There's that QR code there. And then the exciting news is the Croc Tank.
The Croc Tank.
The Croc Tank is coming up, and that'll be Wednesday, December 4th. Mark your calendars. It's part of NobleCon, Noble Capital Markets 20th Annual Emerging Growth Equity Conference, and we will have Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, Damon John, and Robert Herjavec here from the Shark Tank, and they will be hearing pitches from 3 promising startups through Tech Runway, through the Research Park at Florida Atlantic University, and through the Florida Atlantic Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. So if you're interested in pitching, it's open to alums now. It's open not only to alums, it's not only to students, but also to alumni. So interested in this, zoom in on that QR code and check out, just Google Croc Tank, Florida Atlantic University, NobleCon. And that's my commercial for today.
Well, that's a pretty awesome commercial.
I didn't know if I had to do another commercial later, though. That's the problem. Should I save something?
Save something for a little bit later.
I'll just go through it again.
So let's go back to the Croc Tank for a moment, because I don't think that many people know that the Sharks are coming to town. Right, like who's judging that to even get into the competition to pitch?
It's
right?
going to be.
There's 3 companies, and there's different verticals, of course, get in, like the student body or more seasoned, startups that have revenue generated already. But who's the judges behind the scenes?
There will be an internal competition, and it'll go through the Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. It'll go through Tech Runway and also the Research Park. And so after that internal competition, 3 finalists will emerge. They will either be students or alumni or both. And from there, the Sharks will decide who's going to pitch. So there's going to be 3, I believe there are going to be 3 finalists from each of those organizations or those competitions, and then they'll pick 3 to pitch to them live there on the 4th of
And I'm just
December.
curious, do the sharks do this often at universities? Like, are they going to take a piece of this and put it on their real Shark Tank or a clip of it? Sometimes
I
they
don't
go like
know.
flashback, so they show 30 seconds.
There, I
What do
don't
you do?
know. It's possible. I think it's part of this NobleCon.
Okay.
So they are running the show, and we're just having it here. So we're kind of involved with that through their good graces. So it's an event that's being held here at FAU. And so I imagine they will get publicity. Damon John has been here and spoke before. He had a huge crowd a few years ago. That was pretty amazing talk, I think. And it's great to have the others here as well. And but as far as what they're going to do in terms of publicity, we hope they give us a lot, but we'll see.
We got to get some deals, right?
That too.
That's
We'll
they're
see if
coming
they
to
take it.
town. They might
Yes.
open up their checkbook and really help a brand down.
Just
here.
remember, it's
Hopefully,
reality
they start-
TV though, Jason. So it's not real.
Really, it's not all
Yeah.
real what I see out there. I was fortunate to have the chance to be on elevator pitch. I was a sub. They called me in last minute. Brandstar was in town, and they were an elevator pitch, so I got to see the behind the scenes. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I walked to the elevator like 30 different times, right? And I didn't get my chance to pitch. But the people who did, it's like hours behind the scenes for that 3-minute clip that you see. So everything is obviously behind the scenes of the Shark Tank.
One of our students.
Most of these are, they're jamming them in. They have different outfits. Like they do most of the Shark Tank in a day or two versus like spread out over what it looks to be like 8 to 10 weeks. So you could tell like, did they shave or not, for example.
Continuity, that's key. That's a key thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's
talk to our alum. Yeah.
Let's talk to our alumni in the Shrimp Tank studio today. We have Scott Diament joining us in the studio. He is in charge of Palm Beach Show Group as well as Provident Jewelry. We all need jewelry all the time, right? I have a wife, and when I have to get out of trouble, I have to go to a jewelry store, of course, and find something, or for Valentine's Day, anniversary, Christmas, whatever it might be. So, Scott, welcome to the Shrimp Tank today. To start things out, I guess talk to us about your brands.
Thank you so much. Well, I started Provident Jewelry with some partners back in 1993.
Okay.
And Provident's a full-service jewelry store, watches, diamonds, colored stones, you name it. I'm a gemologist, and we have 6 stores throughout South Florida, including Palm Beach and Naples, Florida.
Okay. And tell us the roots of the business. Like, how did this all
So
was it from your heritage in New York? Like, obviously lots of times when I see, the jewelry industry, I think of the Diamond District, New York City. My father owned a store called Captain Hooks in New York City, right? And lots of times people, when it came to jewelry, it's like it was in their veins, their blood, right? Like everyone knew, like, oh, that's 6 generations, 4 generations, right?
So yes, I came down to go to school at FAU actually, so I'm an alumni of here.
Nice.
And I had no tie whatsoever to the jewelry business. So I had graduated with a business degree, and I wanted to start some business, any business. I actually didn't really care that much. And my last name is Diament, which is the Polish spelling of the stone. And I met a business partner that had just entered the diamond wholesale business in Miami. And he liked me and thought I was smart. And I had started my first business when I was 12 years old. So I had about $60,000 saved up when I was 20. And I put that in the jewelry business, and it all went from there. But my jewelry business was particularly interesting back then because we bought an existing store on Clematis Street, which, is the main street in downtown West Palm Beach. And it had a license that allowed us to loan money as well. So some might call it a pawn shop. So it started out that way, which got me experience not just with jewelry and watches, but with pretty much everything else you could think of in luxury.
Can we go back to when you were 12 years old for a moment? Right. I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I talk about the value of getting a head start. Right. I had a young entrepreneur scenario. Like I would have a lemonade stand, then I would work at my father's store. Then I would flip remote control cars. Like I'd buy them and then sell them, back in the day on eBay, or these days, of course, Facebook Marketplace you could do, or all these other platforms that exist. But I think it's very important to get a head start so that way you could make that aggressive move when you are in your 20s after you graduated from school. So talk about what you did from 12 to 21, I guess, to really get that $60,000 saved up, and how important it was to then blossom the rest of your career.
Yes, certainly. So I was bored one day, and I went to my father, and he said 12-year-olds are not allowed to be bored. And he goes, "Why don't you start a business?" And I said, "Well, how could I actually start a business?" And he said, "Well, I always had an idea to deliver bagels to people's homes on Sunday morning." And I said, "Okay." So I'll take the white pages and I'll highlight a particular area. And I did. And I created my own script. And I called on the telephone. I knocked on doors and I built up a bagel delivery route.
That's hilarious.
And I
That's
was,
like unheard of, right?
it's pretty unheard of. And then nobody even does it
bagel
today. And
delivery, yeah.
yeah, and I really did all aspects of this. So I would photocopy the menu, and I would call on Fridays and take the order, and wake up real early on Sunday to do this. I then negotiated the price I'd pay for bagels with the store because I bought them in bulk, and then I would make it into smaller bags. And I delivered. A lot of times, I delivered by maybe 8 a.m. and people would just leave the money on the door for me, to do that. I built it up and I sold it at 14.
For you.
Yes, and I took that money, I put it into a chocolate business where I bought chocolates and I put them in molds to make shapes out of them because chocolates are worth a lot more in shapes than they are in little pellets. And then I took that money, I put in the stock market. I was the president of the Stockbroker Career Club, and I did well in the stock market. And so that's what. And I had a bunch of other stuff in between there, but those were probably the highlights of 12 to 20 years
Did
old.
you
basically.
fail a lot when you were that age where things didn't go right, and you had a learning lesson from some of the failures within
Uh,
those businesses?
not really, not really. I mean, I have had business failures, and we could talk about the few that I have had, but not really then. Things seemed to go my way, but it had a lot to do with scaling. So, when you think of doing any business, if you could turn $1 into $2, that's fine, but that's not a scalable business. You need to be able to really, turn $1 into $10 million. So how do you do that? You have to think differently. I don't think at that point in time, my mind was maybe educated enough, or I had enough experience, or I was around the right mentors to know that I should always be concentrating on scaling these things. And so it was really kind of the simple parts about business.
When did that shift occur in your life, would you say? Because often I know, like, when I hit my 20s, it was like, okay, I'm going to become a financial advisor in New York City, right? And the goal was to make $50,000, then $100,000, and you're like, oh, if I could just become like a sales manager, right? And then I'm going to get a W-2 paycheck and train other people, right? That was such a awesome track that many financial advisors want to have. But then sometimes you hit that, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I'm a one-man show, right? And then you're like, this I call a clickable moment happens. You're like, wait, I can't keep going this direction. I have to treat this like a business. When was your clickable moment that you had to realize, like I can't scale the way I'm doing these things? And just like what you mentioned, like, when did that occurrence happen in your business?
With the first jewelry store.
Yeah.
So the store did X dollars, and then in a year it did twice that, and then a year after that it did twice that, and it really did ramp up pretty quickly. And what I found about myself was that whereas I did have a lecture once at FAU where the guy who started a surf shop said he was successful because of single-mindedness of purpose, I would say I've been successful with whatever the opposite of that is. So I chased thing after thing after thing. So once I had any kind of capital from the first jewelry store, I started putting that into real estate. And now I have a commercial real estate portfolio, residential, industrial. At the same time, I said, okay, how else can I make money? How can I make money with money that I have? And I started doing asset-based lending, throughout the first, let's say, 5 years. So real estate, asset-based lending. Then I had become aware that they were building the Palm Beach County Convention Center, and my business partner got us the first contract in that convention center, like 001. And we created something called the Palm Beach Show. and later the Palm Beach Show Group, of which I have events from New York to California. I've done maybe 70 major events. On the LA Art Show out in Los Angeles, and shows in New York, and the major shows in January and February at the Palm Beach County Convention Center.
And explain to our audience some of these shows in more detail.
Of course. So I call them art shows, but art, it could be art, antiques, and jewelry. We can call them luxury shows. Basically, I lease the convention center, and then I release the convention center to exhibitors. So you could say at its most basic, it is a real estate play, but it requires so much in terms of marketing, advertising, promotion, logistics. And because it's something like, an airplane model, if the airplane flies with one person or flies with 350 people, it's about the same, but they lose money if they fly with one person. So our goal is to produce, incredible events that consumers want to come to, that other dealers, exhibitors want to come to, and sort of like rinse and repeat on that. But I built everything. So I built the walls and the lighting, and it's a very unique company because most of the companies that produce shows at convention centers, they just do one sliver of it. But this is, again, back to maybe my personality and that of my business partners, that we thought, if we can learn one thing, why can't we learn 10 things? Why can't we learn 100 things, basically?
How do you recognize these opportunities? What is the key element that leads you into these different types of opportunities?
I'd say value. So when I look at shows, like where to produce a show or whose show to buy, because I've done everything from buy shows from individuals, from associations, start them organically. I say, where can I add value? Where could my companies add value? And when you start to think about anyone listening to this, like whatever you can do to add value that you could sell to anyone, any entity, that's what you should be concentrating on. Because if you just look at things and you can't add any value to them, or if you own them or ran them, it would actually take away from the value. I would say stay away from there.
Okay. And did you expand the different jewelry stores before you got into the show group, or were you doing these things at the same time? Did you focus in on building out the jewelry business and then move to that, or how did that work?
I did them all simultaneously. And on any given day, I really don't even know what I should be doing. Only because there's always so many things to do.
Right.
I usually say I pick up something and I push it forward, and I pick up something else, I push that forward. But no, it was all simultaneous. And because there's kind of a river that runs through everything I do, luxury is definitely a catch phrase for almost every business I have in some sense.
What does luxury mean?
So we have a saying: luxury can't be mass produced, right? Luxury has to do with the higher end of virtually anything. So if you say, what is a luxury house? I might say it's a shower with 9 shower heads. So when you start thinking about luxury, you might think, oh, a Bentley, a Rolls is luxury. So luxury is where people on Maslow's hierarchy of needs have reached the top, self-actualization, and then they can afford the disposable income to buy luxury, basically.
Wow, that's the first time I've ever heard of Maslow being mentioned on the shrimp tank. How about that? Let me ask you, going back to Florida Atlantic, what is the one thing or two things you wish you had learned in college that would have helped you in the business world that you didn't get?
Well, if I could have studied data science, I would have studied data science. So everything and anything around what occurred for the last 25 years, I really had very little exposure to that. My classes at FAU were first the general classes, let's say history or philosophy and things like that, and then business classes, so management, finance, entrepreneurship. I remember that was a just an emerging catchphrase when I went to FAU, and the idea that you had to think out the entire process, business plans, how are you going to capitalize it, and on. But No, definitely it would have been more in computer science or data science if I had to tell my younger self what should I have focused more on.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Did you write a business plan for any of these businesses, or do you operate that way, or is it more
So
off the cuff?
I did once when we wanted to expand to Naples. So we had a store on Clematis Street in downtown West Palm Beach, and we wanted to open in Naples, Florida. And so we found this store in the New York Times actually, and we were purchasing it, and we wrote a business plan for a potential investor with sort of like a good, better, best scenario, and we were looking to raise at the time $500,000. And the investor turned us down because he said that we were not looking at the downside enough in this business plan, and that even our worst case scenario wasn't bad enough, basically. So he did not give us the money. We figured out how to borrow the money. So we did not take an investor at all. We borrowed the money. And in our very first year, we exceeded our best case scenario by 50%, our
Wow.
best case. And that stake would be worth millions and millions of dollars right now.
Was that your second store? Or?
Yes, that was the second store.
I see.
Yes,
And
that
so
was-
this investor missed out on turning $500,000 into millions.
Yes.
Yeah. Had you ever gotten investors before that, or is that the first time you would want to go out and get someone to invest in your businesses?
I had not gotten investors before that. So before that, we were able to take funds that we had, although they were minimal, and borrow funds. So not actually have a money investor. And so I didn't need it. And the truth is, even to today, with maybe I have 50 companies plus, I'm not sure I have any just money investors. So I do have partners and they put money in as well, but they work whatever business it is that we are doing together. So I still haven't figured that part out. Although when I look back in terms of, where I started and where we are today, if I would have taken any just money partners, that would have been the most expensive money that I had ever taken or have ever taken. So when and that's an interesting point too, and I don't know if you've covered that before, which is that people think that what they want is just a money investor, right? That they give a return on investment to. But if there is any way I'd say for you to get that money in a way that you don't have to give away, some percentage of your company, I think overall you're better off.
So getting expertise in your partners, getting
Oh,
people
yes,
in
yes,
who knows
yes.
what know what they're doing in a particular industry. Are all of these kind of connected? Is there a thread that runs through all of these? Is it luxury? Is that what runs through everything that you do you think? Or is it
I would
the 50
say
businesses?
definitely high net worth individuals or higher net worth individuals and luxury, because I have a real estate company. Right now, I have a $39 million listing on my own name and a $25 million listing on my own name. So I have a auction house called Market Auctions where we auction luxury items once a month, and that's been very successful. I have a design showroom which is 25,000 square feet, which has art and sculpture and things like that. Yeah, and then jewelry stores and shows, and they're all within this. Okay, where is the money? And then kind of following that, and then just creating another business around, okay, well, people have a lot of disposable income, so why don't I figure out how to create another business that could take advantage of having great interpersonal relationships, and not just me having those relationships, but all of my partners, all of the stakeholders in my companies, that they all have this drive and desire that once they meet someone and connect with them and can service them and solve issues that they have, now we could do more of the same and throughout different businesses.
Can you provide us some tips on, how to stay on top of all these businesses, right? I find consumed myself, right? I'm a financial advisor, right? My firm's New York, South Florida. Then I run this podcast. Now I'm collaborating South Florida Tech Hub, and I feel overwhelmed at times right now in my life. Obviously, the startup owl is consuming a lot of my time. Provide our audience some tips, because I think what's happening, these days is it's so easy to start another company, right? Another social media platform, another podcast, which are marketing engines all often for your other businesses. And everyone's doing personal branding. And I feel like everyone's overwhelmed because everyone can't do what you're doing, running this many businesses at once. So provide our audience some tips on how you kind of stay put together Monday through Friday, doing all these different tasks that you're doing, and how you're kind of passing off tasks to some of your important staff, for example, or people that you're doing business tied to the hip with.
I feel like I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by just great people, and where I think people make an error, in their growth, is they don't hand off enough things. So my theory on it is that you should only do the things that only you can do. If you're a business owner and you want to grow your business, you want to grow multiple businesses, and hand off all the rest. And it's not whether they can do it as well as you can do it or not. It really does not matter at all. What matters is that you keep moving forward. And if you get too overwhelmed, that's also very negative for you and your companies, right? It's negative on a personal basis. It's negative for the companies. It's negative for creativity, which is always needed, especially in today's rapidly changing world. So I would say I delegate, and I have great people around me. And so I try not to get bogged down on the minutia of various things that really are not going to move the bottom line.
So then how do you help the other entrepreneur that's a friend of yours? Because you have a ton of friends, I do too, that run into exactly what you're speaking about. And I try to convince them, like, hey, like, you got to hire someone. Stop doing $10-15 hour work. Like, you could outsource this stuff locally on Fiverr, internationally on Fiverr. You could hire teammates to do things, and they just say, well, I just don't have the money now, right? I was like, and they say that every year you see them on pickleball court, right? They're saying the same thing, like, oh, next year, I'm just not ready yet. So how do you give that entrepreneur a tip to be like, no, like, you can't wait another day, because that individual obviously is going to take the work away, and of course we know then you'll sell more, right? Whatever you're good at, and your revenue will go up. But they seem to always be stuck, which is why you see so many solo entrepreneurs, and they never get to that first teammate, whatever it might be.
I would say bring in partners. So if you don't have the funds, or you don't have the bandwidth, or you don't have the expertise, and you don't want to borrow the money on your credit card, because almost anyone can do that, and I did do that at the beginning, I brought in partners. And I have run almost all my companies like the way that law firms run law firms, which is that they have managing or major partners, and they have maybe non-managing and minor partners. But you bring in partners, and I'd say bring them in for expertise, bring them in so you have another pair of hands, another pair of eyes, another brain to help you. And then, let them, select properly, of course, but then let them do what they do so that you can do what you do.
Yeah, I agree. Too often these days, everyone tries to do everything themselves. Their social media content themselves. Then all of a sudden, like, they start a podcast and they're editing the podcast themselves, right? They have to be an expert on every single topic right there. And then all of a sudden, running their main business, right? And we see a lot of people actually in my field, financial services, right? They're just one person shop, and they do it all, right? And they can never get to the next level because they don't start with that first hire, right? To even make them do the applications, right? That extra hour or two a week. Right.
One of the things you really have to emphasize when you're talking to anybody who wants to be a prospective entrepreneur is the importance of an entrepreneurial team. Yeah. Somebody who knows marketing, somebody who knows operations, somebody who knows the computers and the data. I mean, if you can get together with people, and you did this coming out of college, I believe, right? That was your first partner, was coming out of Florida Atlantic. How did that start? How did that happen? And that's probably where you recognize how important that was, I assume.
Yeah, yes. So when I was looking at different businesses, and I looked at everything from Subway restaurants to ice cream stores to coming up with my own invention, and I met somebody through going to FAU, and he had just entered the diamond business, and we just really hit it off. So we hit it off on a personal level, and then we hit it off on an intellectual level and on a business theory. Because you really have to align with your partners and stakeholders. How are you going to run this business, and how will you provide the services and the rest? And yeah, early on, I again was very fortunate to find someone, and then things just grew, and from there.
What was your skill set that you brought to it?
Well, I feel like I'm very versatile.
Mm.
So I believe I'm pretty good with people. And I was doing the QuickBooks at the time, so I was pretty decent at records and
Mm.
books, and in terms of finance, I'd go out there and I would meet people and ask if I could borrow money from them, and I was able to be good at that. But yeah, I think I have a lot of varied skill sets,
Mhm.
basically. So communication skills. Also, I love to read. I'm always up on whatever the new thing is,
Mhm.
and I'm a very curious person. So
Mhm.
and I'm curious about all sorts of things. When they used to have bookstores, and I'm not saying they don't anymore, but when people used to go to like Books a Million, I would go on the weekend and I would literally walk the aisles and randomly pull a book, read some pages from it, and put the book back if I didn't find it interesting. If it was more interesting to me, so that was like the way you go down the rabbit hole, with the
Mm.
internet today. But that was
Mhm.
a big thing then. So you would go and you do that. So I really learned a lot.
That's funny because I'm remembering driving from Shreveport, Louisiana, where I lived, over to Dallas, and on the way back out of town, stopping at one of these bookstores and buying about 15 or 20 books to take back, and of all kinds of things. That's very interesting. I wanted to ask you one other thing. Um, it seemed like you started out buying existing business. Now, is that kind of your strategy? Because there's two ways to go into entrepreneurship, right? Start your own business or buy an existing business that may be successful that you think you can add value to. Have you followed that route most of the time, or have you just started a new business from scratch? What do you see as the best kind of direction to go there?
Well, I've actually had experience doing all of them. So, like, pretty much every aspect you could think of, from cloning businesses to buying existing businesses to starting business from scratch to inventing products. Every single aspect of that I have done, and I have done it personally. If I was going to give somebody advice, my normal advice is every situation is different, and if you can find something that aligns with your goals and the price is reasonable, meaning the price is justifiable based on what the thing could do, yes, you might be better off buying a business. I would say if you could get a mentor or a consultant, that if you're starting out, right? So you're an entrepreneur, you get out of FAU, you're starting out, you find a mentor or you find a consultant that you don't have to pay a lot of money to, and you really go through different businesses that are either for sale or could be for sale. I mean, some of the businesses I bought were not for sale, and I still bought them. And some of the businesses that I created, like the Palm Beach Show Group, that was totally from scratch. I would say me and my two business partners at the time maybe had never organized a birthday party, and then we organized a show with 220 exhibitors that 40,000 people came to.
Mm.
So, how do you go from zero to that? It's still mind boggling to me. But if you have the right idea at the right time, with the right drive, with the right people helping you and supporting you, it could work. It could work. Mostly it'll fail, but somehow, like I said, most of the things I got involved in, they were successful. I mean, if you want me to go over a couple that weren't, I can, but
We'll do that in
yeah,
the plead the fifth
of
segment.
course, of course.
And a whole lot of patience, right? Because when you're starting something new like that, the amount of patience you have, because things are always going wrong and you're always putting out fires. And I bet you're a guy that acts very fast. Are you one of those people like problems arise and like you're handling them that same day, or you let them wait around?
No, I saw
You know,
problems
yeah,
immediately.
I got a
And
feeling.
yes, at the beginning of the businesses, I would go to my business partner. This is like watching grass grow because everything was moving too slow. And then I got to speed up until it was like a million miles a minute, basically. But I tell people, um, a good decision, even a fair decision made today, is so much better than whatever is some excellent decision that you never actually make. And I would say what separates entrepreneurs from non-entrepreneurs is risk taking. So you have to take the risk, but you have to do these things quickly.
Quickly,
you,
yes.
you because it's also like a door that opens and a door that closes. So almost every good deal that I've ever had in my entire life was a door that opened and it closed just as quickly as it opened. So either I walk through that door or I don't, and then that opportunity is lost. So somehow, even early on, I trained myself to yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. Maybe I make mistakes every single day. I don't know how many mistakes I actually make. So I'm going to make mistakes. But as long as the things that I do are positive overall, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
Really enjoy that because so often entrepreneurs are sucked into social media and they think, okay, I'll read the email and then I'm going to wait 7 days to respond, or I'm not going to take a meeting right away. I'm going to wait like 2 weeks to take a meeting. And a lot of that is fluffy, right? When we see a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, like, no, they want to read that email one time and get off their desk. They don't want to go back to it a week later and then respond or make a decision 7 days later. They just want to get it off their desk. Of course, if it takes a lot longer to do, they're going to take their time. They don't want to rush decisions either, but the little decisions, right? Because we're all as entrepreneurs processing 100 decisions a day and just putting out fires so often. So I really like how you put it. We're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from one of our sponsors. And then we get back, we're going to jump to our What's Hot section of the show.
Join the fastest growing community of professionals on the internet with OWL. Access new networks and otherwise unreachable professional contacts through the one-on-one call feature on the app. Scroll through the list of available professionals and join them for a quick call to build rich connections, expand invaluable relationships, and to broaden your professional landscape without needing lofty referrals. OWL. We bring vetted pros to your doorstep 24/7 on demand. Join our community by signing up at owl.com today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. As a reminder, you can catch all of our past episodes up on our website, shrimptankpodcast.com. Okay, Scott, on this segment of the show, it's called What's Hot. We're going to ask you a topic and dive into why it's hot. So being in the jewelry business, I spent a lot of money on my wife's diamond ring, right? I even got a yellow diamond ring. It's very expensive. But now all of a sudden I see everyone buying these lab grown diamonds. So tell us what's hot about them.
Well,
or you might not think they're hot. You might go the other way. They're not hot at all.
I'd say this: as long as that you don't have a sponsor for the lab grown diamonds, then I could tell you exactly what I think about them. Okay, so basically, the reason why you get your wife jewelry, or let's say anyone gets their significant other jewelry or anything in that luxury field, is because they want to express something to them. And so that's why jewelry is valuable. That's why jewelry is rare, because you want to express your love is rare and valuable. There is nothing valuable about something that could be mass produced in a factory to infinite quantities. So carbon in and of itself is not rare. You could actually pull it out of the air. So it's not rare in any way, in any shape, in any form. And so my beliefs, and many others, are that the price of a lab grown really should be called synthetic diamonds. So the price of synthetic diamonds will go to near zero. So would you give your wife as a nice present Cuber's zirconia? You probably wouldn't, but you still might go to like Forever 21 and buy Cuber's
I wouldn't
zirconia.
be married right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. So yes, it does get a lot of attention. Yes, there are varying thoughts on it, but that's my thought. And if I'm back on the podcast a few years from now and you could buy a 20 carat synthetic diamond for $50, I wouldn't be surprised.
It's an interesting world right now, because like the cost of like one diamond, and I don't know the actual math you do, versus like getting a 3 size carat diamond, and more people are going towards the lab because they just want the look, right? So it's interesting because it's not going to hold its value, right? Like I'm a financial advisor, like I want to buy things like a house that holds its value, and of course goes up over time. Typical diamonds that you're talking about go up over time.
Yes,
right. There's only so many of them on Earth.
But you don't want to lose your wedding ring again in the car.
Oh, you remember?
Oh yeah, that's an old story.
My wife dropped her wedding band, and it fell somehow underneath the carpet. We didn't find it for a year. My wife got lucky.
Oh, the mechanic found it.
She got a second one, right? But 2 mechanics couldn't find it. And then that mechanic came on the show, Arnst Automotive.
Yeah,
give him a plug.
Yeah,
Matt found it over at Arnst.
Yeah,
he's a good guy.
So what is hot? I'm looking at I'm gonna buy something for Christmas.
Yes.
What should I get?
Well, I mean, branded jewelry right now is definitely hot, and it may always have been, but I would say now maybe more than ever. So like Cartier watches, fantastic. Breitling watches. I mean, there's so much variety in the watch and jewelry business. I usually tell people, well, look in magazines and go into a jewelry store, see what you gravitate towards, and then you could narrow down the choices. Because in my stores, I have more than 6,000 items of watches and jewelry, so it's just almost like endless. But definitely branded jewelry names are hot at the moment.
And you've got the 6 stores here. Are these nationwide chains? Is that regressing or continuing on? You know, you have these nationwide Jared or some of these other ones. They're all over the country, right? Is that a trend, or is it coming back the other way, or how do you see that?
I think the jewelry business in general is challenging for scalability. And there's so many factors why that's the case. So I would say if I had to bet, there would be more consolidation in the jewelry and watch business. I don't know if the listeners saw that Tourneau was bought by a company called Bucherer, and Bucherer is just bought by Rolex. So I believe maybe over the next 10 or 20 years, there'll be additional consolidation within the jewelry business. And no, I don't necessarily think there'll be, 400, 500, 5,000 jewelry stores popping up throughout the United States in the next 20 years. So I would say we're probably going towards fewer if I had to place a bet.
And you're at the point where you're not going to start another one, you think, or are you going to keep
Well,
going?
we would probably open a 7th store, but it would be very determined by staffing and the right business partner and the right situation. So I would say we have a bigger chance to grow things like the real estate business, which is very scalable, the auction business, which is scalable, art gallery business, which is scalable. So certain things are just easier to scale.
Okay. Yeah.
You talked earlier about cloning a business. So tell us what's hot about cloning a business, because we don't hear that often.
Yes. So we talk about that a lot within the show organization business, that if you have a successful show or fair or event in one city, you can clone that in another city. So, and it has worked to great success in many of the show organizations. So, what I would say is, your idea, you have a sub shop, right? So you have the sub shop. The sub shop has bread that's a different shape, or it has meats that are done in a different way.
That's with like crumble cookies. Every corner now has another cookie spot that's like crumble cookies. So it's a great example.
Yes.
And then I guess when we talk about what was on my mind? Roland, you could go.
All right.
I
I want to go back a little bit. A mentor's obviously hot. Talk about getting a mentor. Talk about how people do that. How do you kind of approach that? And you at some point you become a mentor. So talk about the mentors in the context of the mentee and the mentor, and then becoming the mentor.
I think probably now it's easier than ever, because you can go on YouTube, you can go on social media, you can interact with people today that you wouldn't even know existed in the past.
On Owl, even.
On Owl, even, exactly. So you go on to the social media platforms, and you connect with someone that shares your goals, your dreams, your desires, that maybe could help you do the things that you want to accomplish, in the world. And maybe at some point you're helping them accomplish it. So
do you regard yourself as a mentor as well?
I would say yes, but I would say I'm more of a mentor towards maybe my children, who are both like business oriented, and or my employees and or stakeholders and or partners.
Sure.
So I'm not sure that I've done much mentoring outside of my circles, although I have so many of them. And I'm not saying I wouldn't be a mentor to someone. Maybe I just haven't been approached by the right person at the right time.
No one really taking that advice seriously, I also find. So often we see mentors who give tips, and then a week later, like, they're not doing anything I'm talking about. But if you saw that entrepreneur actually, like, do what you said and then come back and say, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And you see them executing. It's that feeling, right? No different than our children. right? When you're like throwing the football and they're like, throw more, right? And you see them learning, it just feels, you get the tingles
Yes.
when you see growth, right? And I see too often with mentorship programs, people are just checking a box off. They're like, oh, I'll go be part of, I was just at an event and someone said like, yeah, I stopped being a mentor. And I was like, why? What happened? He's like, because I'd show up every single month and tell them what to do. And then they came back a month later and they do anything I told them to do. So it gets frustrating when you're trying to help people and they're not taking that guidance.
Well, I do think time is our most valuable resource. And with that being the case, I really don't like to waste any of mine.
Absolutely.
But back to that execution, because that was something you had said earlier, and I did want to pick that up. Executing on things is the absolute most important thing in business. So I've had people come to me and say, I have this idea for X or Y, Z. This has happened many, many times. And they say, but I really can't tell you about it right now because I want to make sure I get a patent or I get copyright, I get something before I tell you about it. And I always want to tell them, okay, I already want to short your invention or your idea. And I know that sounds mean, and I don't mean to be mean, but anyone who feels like they need to do that first is never going to do it. They are never going to execute on it because people feel or believe that the idea is actually meaningful when the idea is like 1% of it or some tiny, tiny percent of it. And if I were going to give a course in entrepreneurship, I would say, do something that you can execute on and execute well on and repeat that. And not really about, you could have a good idea, a fair idea, a bad idea. I mean, I don't even know, a bad idea executed really well may even turn into a good idea.
Oh, we see this all the time on like the show, the Shark Tank. Like they get kicked out and they're like, worst idea ever. And then all of a sudden they're like 100 million of growth 2 years later. It's nuts, right? Some of the bad ideas work and some of the good ideas don't. Right.
Yes.
Things that make so much sense. Sometimes you're like, how did that not develop? Like it just didn't work. Like
I guess you're saying you can't keep these ideas secret.
No, of course.
Because you're keeping it a secret from your mentor, you're keeping it a secret from your customers, potential customers. It just doesn't make sense.
I also tell people I don't need any more good ideas. I really don't. So like, yes, I'll help you with your good idea. And I'll tell you from my experience, I invented a product. It's called hair bracelets with a Z. It goes on your arm and on your wrist for women. And it looks like a bracelet, but it ties up your hair. It doesn't pull your hair. It has, like Swarovski crystal stones in it. And so I took that from just an idea into an actual product. And so I know I do have experience with the whole end of it.
So my final question for this segment is about your company mission. You wrote exceeding customer expectations, right? And I feel like that's very difficult today. People's expectations are through the roof, right? I call it the Amazon effect, right? Like Amazon somehow, I could be sitting in the studio in 1 minute when you're talking to Roland, order something and get it somehow to my office, by the end of the day or tomorrow morning. And it's really hard to compete with these very large brands today that have figured out how to do that, right? So all of a sudden, when you are a startup like Owl, great example, like everyone wants everything to be perfect right now. Like, well, next app, I'm going to the next one. Like, I'll come back when your app is like TikTok, super quick. I'm like, they have developers that are $1 million each and a lot of them, right? And it's really hard to exceed just customer expectations in general. Like, could be a local restaurant. So share, I guess, what's hot about the ways that you do that in your businesses. So that's super important, of course.
Yes, I would say it starts with listening to your customer. So you cannot exceed their expectations if you're unwilling to listen to them. So you have to listen to them and you have to see what is it that they actually want, not what you think that they want. And that's a really, really big issue. Like, let's say with an app, if I were giving advice, not that you asked me for any advice, but if I was giving advice, I would make the app super, super simple. And then I would add. So I would make it as simple as could do the function of what your app does, and then add a feature, then add a feature. And as you said, comparing any app to what Instagram does. I mean, Facebook spends $20 billion, on developers and programmers to make Instagram perfect or near perfect. And it's not even near perfect. So yes, I would say concentrate on where you can move the needle with your clients. First, listen to them. And then, in one of my businesses at the Palm Beach Show Group, we have 2,000 clients, or have had 2,000 clients. And sometimes I'll make a joke and I'll say, it's so hard to please the clients. If you went around handing out $100 bills, you'd have some that would say, why is it not 200 or why is it not 500? You have some that when you gave them the $100 bill, they'd say, you must be charging me too much money if you're willing to give me $100 bill. So I would just like my rent for my booth space to be less. So you're just not going to please everyone no matter what you do. But if you ascertain what they're really looking for, what it is that your product is going to do to change their life, improve their life, get them to make money, or whatever else that thing is, connect people. If concentrate on that thing. So if, let's say, your app is a connector app, then you make it so it's going to connect the right people at the right time all the time.
I love it. I love it. I love the part that you're like, you can't please everyone by just even giving them money, which is so true. I think someone has to do a real survey like with that. Like, go somewhere and just start handing out dollar bills, and you'll see people just be like, "No, I'm good." And you're like, "Really? You don't want a real dollar bill?" And they will. You go to a mall, because when I was in financial services, my first couple of years, I would have a booth at the mall, and I kind of would think that way. I was like, "Well, this is crazy. Like, I could give them Starbucks coffee, and be like, hey, do you want a coffee? Our firm's paying for it." I'm like, "No, no, I'm good." And like, everyone wants Starbucks, and then second later they go online for Starbucks. Right. But same thing with money. I just think often people will literally not take it, like, too good to be true. The money has something on it, right? It's tracing me. It's going to follow me around, right? Like, people will just come up with theories why the money's not good. And I bet it's a very big portion, higher than everyone could imagine. I bet you like
100%,
30-40% of people would be like, no, I'm good. I don't want your money.
I'll take a 20. And I'll take Chick-fil-A.
Can we do a survey? Can we get some student? Let's do it one day.
You definitely do a survey on that. But so what I would say is, like, look to where people would spend any amount of money. Let's say Taylor Swift concert. So look at the opposite, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the opposite is also true, right? You try to give people money, they won't even take it. But if Taylor Swift puts her tickets, on Ticketmaster or whatever, you have lines, and then they start trading it for more money. And like, what are you actually getting out of that? You get to go to a concert with another zillion people that you're like a sardine, and you get to listen to music in a sense, in a way that's not as good as you could listen to music on your iPod. I mean, on your headphones. So yeah, So when you're devising, motivating people, when you're devising that you want your business to grow, think Taylor Swift.
That's true. She has somehow figured a way how to get tickets over $1,000 on average, right? It's kind of nuts.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And you look to others, like I would say Elon Musk and all of his companies. Look at what he does with his companies, and try to emulate whatever tiny portion of that thing that you see that he does. Because if he was able to do this, maybe you could do a small portion of it.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from one of our sponsors. Then we get back, we're going to jump into our Plead the Fifth segment of the show.
All right, the Croc Tank is coming to Florida Atlantic University for the first time ever. The Sharks, Kevin O'Leary, Damon John, Robert Herjavec are leaving the safety of their studio to collaborate with the university for a live pitch competition. We're excited to announce they have chosen Florida Atlantic for this exciting Croc Tank to take place on Wednesday, December 4th, during the Noble Capital Markets 20th Annual Emerging Growth Equity Conference, NobleCon 20. To identify the startups who will pitch to the Sharks, Florida Atlantic's Adams Center for Entrepreneurship, Tech Runway, and Research Park are hosting internal competitions to identify the 3 most promising startups that will be crowned finalists from each innovation hub. From those 3, the Sharks will decide who will pitch to them in front of a live crowd. Deadline for applications for Florida Atlantic students and alumni is 11:59 p.m. Monday, September 30th. Okay, Monday, September 30th, coming up very soon. It'll be the Croc Tank, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. So we're at our favorite part of the show called Plead the Fifth. So, Scott, you can only plead the fifth one time. Okay. So
yes,
hold it for a hard question. Okay. So, you talk about multiple businesses. Can you share with us, looking back, at all these businesses, what was your biggest failure, and how much of a loss financially was it? Tell our audience. Was it 100,000? Was it $1 million? Right? What was it? And I guess dive into the business attack.
Okay. So, I mean, there were several. One, I ended up buying a gas station in Sebring, Florida. a 24 pump station with an 8,000 square foot convenience store and a 130 foot car wash, and it was a gigantic operation. I ended up with it with a business partner of mine, and it was just very, very difficult to manage and run. We went through a series of managers. We knew very, very little about the business or how money was made within this business. We just loaned money on it and ended up with it. And we took something like $1 million loss on it, roughly. It was one of the larger single losses that I had ever taken in business.
Do you stay away from certain sectors now? Like ones that, like I'll use Celsius as a great example, right? Like you see it on shows all the time. Like, okay, that's one industry I won't touch. Like Pepsi and Coca-Cola own distribution, and so many beverages, like they're there for 2 years, they're gone the next. And the same with mobile apps, actually, right? 99% of mobile apps, they're gone, right? The ones that survive hit grand slams, but most even seasoned entrepreneurs don't even touch mobile apps because they've seen other friends of theirs go in and go right out a year or two later, right? So is there certain sectors you won't even play in that field anymore?
I think the best is to keep an open mind on this. But overall, I had nightclubs that were not successful, and I ended up in the liquor license business. So I have a company called Entertainment Assistant, where we buy, sell, and loan on liquor licenses throughout the state of Florida. And that proved very successful. So like when you talk about anything in terms of business, there are ways to make money, even if you do not like that sector. So let's say with Celsius, to give you an idea, what if you could make a better can? So instead of selling the whole thing, you sell to the manufacturers of these beverages the can that is just different than the way the can is, or less expensive. Like one of the best business in the world, I believe it's called Tetra Pak, and they figured out how to make a rectangular box that we all use, and it's a multi-billion-dollar company. So they made a better, let's call it a better mousetrap for how to put beverages in it, or maybe the way they're manufactured with ingredients. And so instead of being the outfront one, then you're a supplier to them. Like you may be better off, selling the napkins to, Burger King or McDonald's than actually owning a Burger King or McDonald's. So I would just say keep an open mind as to if there are industries, and those industries are growing industries, how you might be able to become a supplier to some end of it, even if you didn't like the industry as a whole.
I said that a lot about podcasts right now, right? Everyone's starting a podcast. There's over 3 million of them, right? This small percentage, under 1%, are actually making money. So you're better to be the one selling the microphones, right? Or the one helping putting shows like this together, right? Because there's so many people that are willing to spend money on podcasts today. And they're chasing to be Joe Rogan, or, all these shows that are being, purchased by Spotify for $100 million, but it's like such a tiny fraction. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So everyone has a dollar and a dream.
Yes.
So you have to deal with a lot of these high net worth individuals. True.
Yes, I work with a lot of high net worth individuals.
Who has been the most difficult high net worth individual you've had to deal with? Tell us a story about a conflict you had with some rich person in Palm Beach that you won't even want to do business with them anymore.
Well, I could tell you a story, but not tell you the name of the person.
Well, you could tell us the story, and then I'll ask you for the name, then you can plead the fifth.
Got it. Well, sometimes high net worth individuals can be, they could be interesting to deal with. Again, their time is like super valuable. So they usually don't give you a lot of it. I did have a thing where I made a deal with someone that is incredibly wealthy, and had a contract on that deal. And they decided they didn't want to fulfill the contract of that deal, even though I had it. So they called me and said, I'm going to give you your money back. And I said, well, I don't want my money back. I want the deal that's in the contract. And they said,
all signed.
Yes, signed, sealed, delivered. And they said, okay, well, you can sue me and you're going to win. That's what they said to me. And they said, but you're going to lose in the end. And so I had my business partner, I had one other business partner on this particular deal. And he said to me, no, just do it. Just force him to go through with the deal. And I said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. It's just a really, really bad idea, actually. So I said, fine, send me a check. And, I got it and cashed it.
So you did settle.
No, I did gave him exactly what he wanted. I would say this. I'll give 2 pieces of advice on this, and then yeah. So the one piece of advice is if you go into business with someone who's incredibly wealthy and has a lot of disposable income, it may be a terrible idea, and that's why when I look at it, I'm like, I have to make sure that individual I really trust, because they could just bankrupt you. Because if what you have is some teeny tiny fraction of what they have, believe me, it will not be good for you. That's one. The other thing with it is that I make friends. I don't make enemies. And I would suggest this to anyone on the podcast. There's just no good that comes out of burning bridges. There's no good that comes out of fighting with people that are very wealthy and very successful. There's just no good in it. I can't say that a single lawsuit that I ever had, I would consider that it went well. Even when I won, I would say it didn't go well. So I would say, yeah. So that would be my advice around there.
Okay. And then as far as who this person was.
Yeah, I'm going to plead the fifth on that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
And will we know the name though?
Yeah, everyone would know name.
Yeah. You made Roland's day. He loves when guests plead the fifth from him.
Yeah.
He's got excited. Well, Scott,
we fight over this. Sorry.
Okay.
We do.
Ask him one more question though.
No, I'm good. I'm going to let him free. He answered a lot of difficult questions. But Scott, I want to say thank you for joining us here on the Shrimp Tank. For our audience listening, if they want to get in touch with you, what are the best routes?
Well, my email address works. Pretty much, I even think my number is probably published somewhere on the internet. They can get in touch with me.
Real estate, so all stuff is
so
out there.
yeah, so it's Scott at palmbeachshow.com, sdiamond@gmail.com.
Serious question. How often, with all your stuff out there, do people email you directly and just ask for help?
Almost never. And I'm about as public, I think, as someone could possibly be. Not necessarily famous, but public. And most of the time, people do not reach out and do not, ask for assistance with almost anything, except if they want to sell jewelry. So every single day I get people that say, I want to sell this, could I bring it in? Every single day I get people inquiring to buy jewelry and watches, hard to find things. And I really have the same thing related to real estate. People are always calling me saying, do you have anything to sell? Do you have anything to buy? Can you help me with this? So yeah, on those ends, but more for specific purposes.
What about collaborations? Like, do you get a lot of people say, hey, because they want to give, they might not necessarily want to sell you, right? Because I think it's important. Often people are scared to give their information out. No different than like the idea question. Like, oh, I don't want to tell your idea. I'm always like, you give out your cell, you give out your email, like nobody's hounding you as much as you believe, right? And it's interesting that you're bringing this up. You're like, my information is everywhere and no one's asking for help, right? And same like selling, yes, that's always going to happen. But like even collaborations, like do you get pitched for collaborations often or not so much, would you say?
Very rarely.
Yeah, that's my point. So that's why I kind of wanted to make a point of that, because so often, people think entrepreneurs are hiding, right, and not giving out their info because they're fearful that like their information will be exposed, and then people hound them to get help or do too many collaborations. And I always say it's just not true, right? I personally don't get many either, right? I run this show. I run now a show with Sapphire Tech Hub, right? And my information is all over the internet because I'm a financial service professional, right? So it's publicly listed on our website, and I have to, like, legally due to regulations. And 99.9% of my emails are always selling me something, right? It's never a genuine email saying, hey, Jason, I saw that you're doing the Shrimp Tank. I see you're doing this thing with Sapphire Tech Hub. I'd like to call you and have a conversation about collaborating with you, right? Versus, hey, I see you run Owl. We are a development firm. Love to see how we could help, make your app better, right? Or hey, here, we're a podcasting company. We could help you get better guests, or hey, we're, you know what I mean? It's
one of the issues with LinkedIn. Like, I happen to really like LinkedIn in one sense, and I really dislike it in another sense, which is that every single email that nobody could ever keep up with, or every direct message on LinkedIn, is trying to sell you something. Like, nobody I can't remember the last time I got something on LinkedIn from just somebody that says, yes, I saw your profile. I see that you have 50 businesses. I have this for you, or you might have this for me, or could I do this or that? Never.
I promise to send you that message.
Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
I just
appreciate that.
Well,
I
it
just
comes
asked to
back-
connect with you, Ashley. Yeah.
It comes back to laziness and AI nowadays, because everyone is just like, oh, if I send 100 messages a day, like, one's going to answer. It's like, yeah, but the one that answers is not the one you want. Wouldn't you rather just send 7 genuine messages out? Like, our first 100 guests of the shrimp tank, actually, most of them came through LinkedIn. I literally just sent them a picture of our last guest, a little link to their episode. I said, hey, you look like a great fit to be a guest on the shrimp tank, right? And back then, like, podcasting was new. It wasn't as easy as today, where like our show is more well known. We have a lot of folks in PR that recommend us, and we don't have to worry about getting guests these days. But back then, it was really like when I was at events, I would grab my iPhone, show it to them, or good old LinkedIn. A solid message to their inbox would land you potential guests. I remember I did that with Heather Monahan. Heather Monahan came right through a LinkedIn message. She saw it. It was good timing. She was growing her speaking career. She wanted to get on a lot of podcasts. The picture kind of showed off our brand very well. But I generally like hit the like button, the comment a few times on her posts before I sent the message, not a straight like, hey, come join us, right? So I think people just kind of look for volume today. And I think things have to go the other direction for a change. Like, hey, just be the one message in their inbox for the day that just is generally just being like, hey, Scott, saw your podcast, and listen to what you talked about cloning a business, right? And hey, you want to jump on a call? I'm thinking about cloning a business and just want to talk, right?
Yes.
Like,
Authenticity. You're bringing a really, really important point, which is that authenticity in today's world is so meaningful and so valuable, and maybe the only way to cut through the numbers game or the noise or all the phony stuff that we see online all day long is be yourself, be authentic, be real, and then connect with people in a very real way, and not with just the idea of selling somebody something. Like, don't just ask what somebody else is going to do for you, basically.
absolutely. So I'm going to give you one tip to wrap up this episode. So a unique trick with the Owl app is actually on LinkedIn, you could send an away message. So what I do, and so does Ellie in the room, so does Stephanie in the room, is we just literally send a message right back when those DMs come over. It's like, hey, if you want to get a shortcut, to have a conversation with me, you call me on Owl. That's the place I take all my intro calls. My social media inbox is a nightmare, right? And people see that now they have the chance. The ball's in their court. They reached out to you, right? They could go over to Owl and call you directly there and pay the price that's listed on your profile. But you know what ends up happening? Most of them don't take the time to go to Owl. So right off the bat, it's just spam message. They're really not taking your time serious. But the ones who do download Owl and then come in there because they're going to use your referral code. So you're going to see like $10 credit because you get a bonus when they download Owl. All of a sudden you're like, hey, that's someone that took it very serious. And they went in there. And then actually sometimes, even though you're not technically scheduling a call with them, sometimes you message them back on LinkedIn. Hey, I saw you download Owl. They're like, hey, try to find me. I'm going to be available tomorrow on Owl, 10 to 11. Just give me a ring there. And a lot of times they do. Right. So you take those 10 messages and the one good one comes to the top. Otherwise, you lose an opportunity often because sometimes there's so many darn messages on LinkedIn, and then your inbox gets overwhelmed to go through, and you're like, this is a job just to go through it. Right. And then even if you hire someone, it's like it's kind of difficult to hire someone. Sometimes they can't see certain opportunities that your eyes are looking at, of course. But a simple auto response, you just take the work out of it. You're giving them the chance and then let them go from there, of course. So
That's great for productivity. Thank you.
absolutely. Well, that wraps up today's episode. Everyone, listen to me back next Wednesday right around 1:00. Take care, everybody.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.